call the meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation to order, and could we have the roll called, please?
Member Becker is absent. Fry.
Here.
Bender is absent. Bourne.
Here.
Warsami.
Present.
President Wheeler.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
So we have quorum. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes, somebody want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved for
Second.
August 28th.
Moved and seconded for our August 28th meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're about to begin our public hearing. But before we receive comment, we will have several presentations, and the very first person to present to us will be Micah Intermill from the Finance Department, and he'll give us an overview of the budget. Micah, welcome. Good to have you here.
Mr. President and members, thank you for the opportunity. Again, for the record, my name is Micah Intermill. I'm the city's budget director, and I'm pleased to be here to present to you the mayor's recommended budget for 2020 and corresponding property tax levies. Starting off, just with a view to what's changed overall in the mayor's budget. So this is the city budget excluding the independent boards, and we do go back and forth a little bit in this presentation, but so excluding the independent boards, the mayor's recommending a budget of $1.62 billion, which is about $70 million greater than the city-only budget for 2019. So just comparing the budgets year to year, which is a little bit tricky because individual changes from year to year can be deceptive. Trying to boil down everything that's in that $1.6 billion budget to a few categories here for you. On the left, you see the 2019 adopted budget. On the right, you see the 2020 recommendation. The bottom bar in the sort of medium color blue is that represents the ongoing operating budget spending in each year. Then the gray bar represents one-time spending, so items that won't necessarily recur in future years unless the mayor and council choose for that to happen. The dark blue that you see is the city's capital budget, and so when looking year to year, those 3 items are pretty similar, pretty stable. You see the ongoing spending has increased a little. The capital budget has shrunk a little bit, and I'll explain that on our next slide. But then the primary difference between the 2 years is in the 2020 recommended budget, we're reflecting our medical self-insurance costs, which a few years ago the city moved to medical self-insurance, which has proved to be a good financial move over the long run because we're seeing slowed growth in our medical insurance costs. We just simply haven't reflected it in the budget over the last few years as we've ramped into the program. So 2020 is the first year we're showing it in our budget. Looking at the general fund itself, the expense budget grows by 7.4%. And when you hear that, that's a number that's bigger than the 2% that people expect for inflation. And so let me explain to you some of the other changes. On the right-hand side of the pie chart, in that medium blue color, you see our current service level growth. So that is city inflation. And that's everything from staff to fleet costs and the cost to operate our buildings. That's what's reflected there. And that alone increases the expense budget by 2.9%. The bottom of the pie chart in the light gray, you see our financial policy changes. And so the mayor has recommended a few different things to help set the city up for success in the future. So the first, the mayor has recommended accelerating a plan that was put into place under then Mayor Hodges to pay for our contingency, our general fund contingency fund, our rainy day savings account, to pay for that via the property tax levy as opposed to one-time money, which is how we had paid for that in the past. And so I gave a very similar presentation on Monday to the city council, and at the time I used the analogy, if this were a kitchen table budget conversation, you can think of that contingency as your emergency emergency savings that you're supposed to have to cover unexpected expenses. The city financial policy is that we carry a contingency of 1% of next year's budget. We had been paying for that one time in the past, and so essentially, again, going back to the kitchen table, we'd be expecting to see an annual bonus check to be able to pay for the next year's emergency savings, which is not, it was something that the city was able to do successfully for a number of years, but looking to the future and any potential economic slowdown that may occur, we're now fully funding that contingency through the property tax levy, or again, that kitchen table example, through our regular paycheck. The light blue, the sliver that you see there is parks and streets. So the deal that this body is very familiar with, that the city and the park board came to agreement for a 20-year plan on taking care of deferred maintenance needs of both our neighborhood parks and our city streets. The impact to the general fund for 2020 is an increased expenditure of about $400,000. Overall, you'll see a bigger number, but that includes additional debt that's being taken on. On the left-hand side of the pie chart in the dark blue, you'll see 2.5% is what the city's budget general fund budget is growing related to the change items, that the new spending that the mayor has proposed. And then in the top sliver that you see, the dark gray, the state legislature a few years ago passed legislation to require additional contribution for employers related to public safety pensions, so police and fire. And so there's a 2-year phase-in for that increase, and this year that's about $1 million, or 0.3% of the general fund. So with our other funds, the special revenue funds are seeing a decrease of about 10%, looking at 2019 versus 2020. Again, looking year to year can be deceiving. In this case, there was one-time spending in those special revenue funds related to affordable housing in 2019 that isn't continuing at the same level in 2020. In our capital projects funds, we are seeing a decrease related to changing projects. So we will be borrowing and spending less for our new public service building across the street, as well as less for our east side storage and maintenance facility in northeast Minneapolis. And so this doesn't represent, I think on Monday we had a question, is this less spending on infrastructure? And it doesn't relate to the streets and the sewers projects that we think about, but just those city facilities. We see reduced debt service payments, and that's just a nod to the somewhat cyclical nature of our debt payments. Our internal service funds, we see a dramatic increase, but that is simply related to that self-insurance that I had mentioned earlier. Mr. President.
Let me ask a quick question about the debt service, because we're involved in bonding and all that kind of stuff. With the change in the markets and things sort of moving up and debt becoming really a bit more expensive, is that going to impact that in several years out, or is that just because we've done such a good job these last few years of bringing it down, it looks really good today?
So, Mr. President, I think the several years out is the key to your question there. I myself do not directly work on our debt issuance. Certainly Mr. Ruff could answer, or Mr. Ablin, our Director of Debt, could. Mr. Ruff or Mike?
Mr. President, I think generally the short answer is we're not worried. I think interest rates they were up for a while, they're coming back down again. This variation just means that our staff is well managing the debt portfolio. We're trying to prepay bonds when we can to save interest costs. We're using some internal loans to take advantage of some of our cash balances. And so it's, I think, more reflective of just good cash management than any kind of concern for the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all. Thank you for the question. Please feel free to jump in as I can clarify in future slides. So then our last grouping of funds here is the city's enterprise funds, which are primarily the city utilities. And so this is an increase in spending of 3.2%, which relates to forecasted increase of utility rates on the average household of about 4.04%. And what that means is an increase to the utility bill of just over $4 a month, or about $50 a year. So looking specifically at the levies line by line, and I've got them all on a chart here, and just to show you the total bottom line that the mayor's recommending in terms of property taxes raised for 2020 as compared to 2019 is an increase of 6.95%. About 78% of the total levy, or 3/4, would go to the city specifically, and a quarter would go to the park board, and to also pay off some other outstanding long-term obligations that the city has. That 78% is a little bit deceiving. So what that includes is the city's general fund, our debt levy, our pension levy, and the Municipal Building Commission. Of course, our debt levy and the pensions do help support the park board as well. So it's not as clean as saying what's for the city and what's not. So moving line by line through that chart, the general fund levy, the mayor has recommended a 13.31% increase, which is larger than the other numbers that you'll see, and it's for a couple of big reasons. So first, our non-property tax revenues, so those that we derive from fees, those that we derive from licenses, are relatively flat in our projections for 2020 as compared to 2019. Last year, there was the city council took action to increase business license fees, which raised an additional $3 million. That didn't happen again for 2020, and so the property tax levy has to pick up some slack, as well as some other changes that we're seeing at the federal level that impact our franchise fees, which really act as a sales tax on gas, electric, and cable services. So I won't get too deeply into those changes, but in total, that's slowing those franchise fee revenues, which do make up about 8% of the general fund. It's reducing those revenues by over $1 million in the future. Last year I talked about an increase in interest earnings because of, again, the good management of staff, as well as a favorable environment out in the marketplace. But our projections for 2020 is that those will stay flat as compared to 2019. And we are also decreasing the use of fund balance for one-time items by over 13%. And so some balances had accumulated in the general fund, some surplus, if you will, and that was being used last year, and that won't, you can only use a surplus once. In the general fund, the mayor has recommended, I'll just touch briefly on some of the major changes. The first relates to affordable housing. So recommending a levy of $1.5 million for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that would be an ongoing source until a future mayor and council decide to ratchet that back, and additional strategies including naturally occurring affordable housing, the mayor's Stable Home, Stable Schools program that he's worked on to ensure that folks can remain in their homes and have some stability in terms of which neighborhood schools they're attending, and a whole host of additional strategies that our Community Planning and Economic Development Department will be explaining to council over the coming weeks. With respect to public safety, there's additional investment in the group violence intervention program, which has been very successful in helping to meet folks at points of crisis to help get them out of the cycle of group violence. Expansion of the community navigator program in the police department, so a navigator to support people experiencing homelessness and opioid use disorder, which is certainly an issue that we have seen emerge in the last few years here at the city. Implement the recommendations from the opioid task force that the mayor and council convened, and also add 14 additional sworn officers to the MPD, 8 focusing on neighborhood outreach, 3 focusing on investigations primarily related to domestic violence and sexual assault, and 3 related to traffic enforcement. With respect to economic inclusion, the mayor and council are working on new cultural districts across the city. So 6 different districts from north to south and northeast and central in between, where the intent is to lift up and promote the cultural groups that live in those areas now, continue to expand the rich culture that we have across the city, and deepen that economic investment in the community from the community. Additionally, the mayor has recommended funding to expand the city's small business team, which does a lot of direct impact to help folks who are starting new small businesses or expanding their small businesses, help them navigate city processes as they set those up. Lastly, just some other highlights that I thought the board may be interested in. First, just as a reminder, in 2020, we'll get to vote in 3 different elections. One presidential nominating primary, which is new for the state. It's something that our city clerk has worked hard with the state to ensure that Minneapolis isn't footing more than its fair share of the bill on that, plus the 2 regular elections that we would hold in a presidential year. So in total, the mayor's recommending $4 million to ensure continued robust participation in that electoral process. And finally, there's an issue that the city's been working on for the past few years related to a special revenue fund that was set up for our regulatory services department. We're seeing declining revenues from activity related to enforcement of related to long grass and vacant and boarded homes. As we are moving more towards an education model than a strict enforcement model, we're seeing declining revenues. And so we still have that work. We're still doing that education. We're still inspecting rental properties, and so moving staff from that special revenue fund onto the general fund at a cost of about $500,000 in this year and another $900,000 next year. Moving on through the levies, the mayor's recommending for the Minneapolis Park Board 5.73% increase. This includes an increase of just under 3.8 million for current service levels. That is about 1.2 million beyond the 5-year financial direction. The bond redemption levy is increasing by a little over 5.5%. This is related to that additional debt taken on for parks and streets. Our closed pension funds are seeing a decrease in that levy by over 1/3. Which is a big number, and that relates to some savings that are incurred because of legislative changes. The state is restoring, giving us full confidence in that they will continue the agreement that was forged when MRF merged into the PARA system. And also our police and fire pensions, when those were merged in, there was some unclear language when the law was written. Our CFO, our Chair of Ways and Means, and our mayor did a lot of work with the para board and the legislature to reduce our liability by $6 million a year. The Municipal Building Commission is seeing a 3% increase to their levy. That's just a regular inflationary increase for the operations of this building that we share with the county.
What's the percentage share in the building? Is it
Sure, Mr. President. So the city pays for 60% of the operations and the county pays for 40%. When we're talking about capital expenditures, it's a 50-50 split. The Board of Estimate and Taxation, this body, the mayor is recommending a $0 levy, which is a 100% decrease for 2020, and
I know, but
that's right, Mr. President. So I earlier saw a message from the mayor where he highlighted that as staff has turned over for this body, we have been able to, we've reviewed some of the fund balance that exists in the board's fund, and there are sufficient balances there to be able to continue to operate fully and do the work of the BET in 2020 without raising property taxes to do so. In the mayor's recommended 5-year financial direction, he has recommended an increase in funding in subsequent years.
yeah. Yes, Mayor Fry, you're going to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to have a verbal reflection of what was in that email as well. Given that there was a significant fund balance in BET, there wasn't a need to have additional funding in the budget for this year. However, as that fund balance is depleted, I fully anticipate refunding, if you will, the BET in subsequent years. So I just wanted to say that publicly, both for this board as well as in writing, so that there was clarity. Thank
you very much. Continue.
So moving on to the Teachers Retirement Association levy, the city levies $2.3 million each year to pay a longstanding obligation that for the Teachers Retirement Association, the state teachers pension. There's no change on that from 2019, and we anticipate this will continue until sometime in the 2040s. When that happens exactly depends on the health and life of the fund as we get closer to that full funding date. And finally, the library, there's $10.3 million levied annually for a library referendum that took place several years ago to support debt service for the central library and neighborhood libraries. So that says passed in 2020. That's a mistake on the slide. I apologize for that. That library debt we anticipate will be repaid in 2021. And at that point, the intention is to use the levy to pay for the debt service on the new office building. And so there won't be an increase in the levy. It's just repurposing what those dollars are to be spent on at that time. So with respect to the impacts of the 6.95% increase, this slide just shows our sort of 15-year history of the property tax levy at the city of Minneapolis. And you see that sort of leveled in the 2011 to 2015 years, but has been increasing over the past few years. This year, the largest growth that we see is in apartments, followed by residential. That is simply reflective of a lot of the construction that we all see and navigate as we drive through the city. The city's median value for homes really did see a decline post-Great Recession. And so from the 2008 to 2013 years, you see a lot of decline in home value, but it really has rebounded in the last several years. Since 2015, the city's taxable market value has grown by almost 60%. In the same time, the levy's only grown by 30%. And so, if home value is a direct proxy for wealth, and sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. I think that just suggests that there is more growth out there than is being captured in property tax increases. So overall, this year, the market value is increasing by about 7%, very similar to the recommended levy increase from the mayor. In the past few years, we've been seeing market value increase by more than 10%, or more than the levy. It's been 10% about the last few years. But I think the point I want to stress here is that new construction, even though we are seeing a lot of new construction around the city, and we're in the 8th, I believe, consecutive year of $1 billion worth of construction permits issued. That new construction value is less than 2% of the total, because there is the size of the pie, so to speak, is so big. So really, it's inflation on existing property that's driving most of the market value increase. Other factors influence what the levy increase will feel like for each particular home. So the market value exclusion program that the state operates says that as your home grows in value, we will tax a larger percentage of it. And so those homes there's a phase out at about $413,000. As homes approach that value, they'll be paying 100% of their taxable value as opposed to a lesser percent. The fiscal disparities tax-based sharing program in the metro counties is also something that's of interest every year. This year, the city is contributing $80 million to that pool. We're receiving back $50 million. So on net, we contribute $30 million this year to the surrounding communities. And I think it's important to note that not too long ago, the city was a beneficiary of the fiscal disparities program, and so we should keep that in mind. And lastly, any properties that are in a tax increment financing district will just see a little bit different feels like factor for their home because of the way that the TIF works. So what are the estimated impacts for the median valued home? So that an individual also lives in. So if you own and live in your home, that homestead residential classification, we're seeing that median home value is just under $265,000. It's a change of 7.9% to the property tax bill, or about $111. Again, it's very hard to find that exact median home, just like no household in America has 2.5 children. But because property taxes are such a complex topic, this is really the best way we've found to communicate what those impacts might be. Looking at what the distribution is then, because it's hard to find that exact median, there is quite a bit of variability in terms of what residential properties will feel this year. So on the left side, the way to read this chart is on the very left side, the first blue bar, 3% of residential properties in the city will see a decline in their property taxes, and that's because they're seeing a decline in their estimated market value. 23% will see no change in their property tax bill. So then about 3/4 of properties, all of the other bars, would see an increase. And that ranges from the median right there of 6.7%, which is the red bar, or red line, excuse me, all the way to the right-hand side, which is 6% of properties will see an increase of greater than 20%. Percentages, of course, are a little bit tricky because the higher the value of a home, it takes a higher increase to really move the dial a percent or two. And so, again, all of this is very dependent on individual characteristics of a given property. Each year we like to remind those watching at home and those that you're talking to out in the community of the property tax refund program offered by the state of Minnesota, and that's not just for homeowners, but there's a renter's tax credit as well. There are income phase-outs related to that, and so it's primarily looking to help those with lower incomes. However, there is a special credit. So if I go back to the previous slide, if you have seen your property taxes increase more than 12% and more than $100, there is a property tax credit that's available that is irrespective of your individual income. So everybody's available to that. It's a sort of circuit breaker to help provide a little bit of relief for those properties towards the higher end of the increased scale. That concludes my prepared presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or hand it to the next presenter.
Any questions of Mr. Intermill? Thank you. That was that was very thorough. Appreciate it. And I think Ms. Wiseman is our. I'm sorry. Oh, Al. Okay. I just was going by what I had written down here. Very good. Please. Mr. Superintendent, welcome.
Thank you. All right. Mr. President and Board, hi, my name is Al Bangor, and I'm the Superintendent of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And it's an honor to be here, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited about actually having probably my second presentation and for the BET and the tax levy. So it's no secret that when I was hired into this job that I am a recreation superintendent. And one of the priorities that I knew coming into this job as the superintendent is my lifelong support and fight for the youth of the city of Minneapolis and for youth just in general. So it's been a priority not only by this board but my entire career. I've done a lot of work around this and solidifying the data and creating a development model within our recreation department and restructuring recreation around innovation and moving that to implementation within our recreation centers. So as the board, as you know, we've been talking about youth investment for several years now. And last year, I know that Superintendent Emeritus Mary Merrill spoke about the challenges and decline in funding around our programming and around school time and after school programming. So we are looking for sustained investment and increased support financially for our youth long term. And so with that, and I will speak more later, I would like to at this point turn over to Deputy Superintendent Jennifer Ringgold to share some information with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bangor. Welcome.
Thank you, President Wheeler and board members. And I would actually respond to Julie. That's my sister's name, so must have channeled that one. It's primarily my job tonight to give you some highlights from a report that you would have recently received. It's still a draft report, but this report works to answer the question of what is the gap for youth and what is the desire around youth. So a few of the first slides I'll show you really focuses in on our recreation centers and what we have seen in our recreation centers over roughly the last 20 years, or from 2001 to 2019. And the reason why we use 2001 as the beginning date on this is that this is the year that a historic agreement between then Mayor Sales Belton and Superintendent Emeritus Mary Merrill had put together to start investing in youth and security within the Minneapolis park system. At that point, there was a $1.1 million increase to those initiatives within the Minneapolis park system. So it represents then a time period where we hit a time of good investment for our youth and in our rec centers in general. This slide shows the difference between staffing, full-time staffing, between 2001 and 2019. And you can see there's a difference of about 20 FTEs in that time period. This next slide focuses in on our part-time staff, and we categorize this in terms of full-time equivalents, recognizing that the difference between 156.77 and 130.45 is actually many more staff, but that's the full-time equivalents, kind of similar to the previous presentation. It's hard to find that 2.5 children in any particular household, but that's how we quantified is that full-time equivalents. To get a sense of how that relates to actual public hours within recreation centers, we pulled a representative sample of 5 centers that vary in size, vary in where they're located within the city. And you can see that the hours we were able to serve the public in 2001 versus 2019 are different based on the level of staff that we're able to provide. If you just look at these 5 centers, the total annual loss in hours is just over 4,200 hours. And then that's 5 of the 47 centers that we provide services out of. Another category that we look at is a category of our organization that is actually dedicated towards youth. So rec centers, of course, are also serving individuals beyond youth, but Youthline in and of itself is completely focused on youth. The high of that was 18. I don't know really what the story is between the 17 and 18. Between 2001 and 2002, my guess is that they were working up on hiring at that time. Today we sit at 12, so that's a difference of about 5 to 6 staff, depending on if you're looking at the 17 or 18. So from this, we start articulating the gap in terms of full-time employees and part-time employees at recreation centers and then within our Youthline area. The total value in 2019 dollars of that difference in staffing alone is $3.4 million per year. Now, what we know is that, especially in the recreation centers, not all of that staff time, not all of that staff resource is going to youth. So when we look at the percent of how much of that staff time is actually dedicated to youth in addition to Youthline, we recognize the gap to be about $2 million per year in terms of where we had been in 2001. We have some data on where we have heard the community weigh in previously on the importance of youth. We know that in 2015 and 2016, we did a considerable amount of work, both the city and the park board, looking at many of our assets, and ours was to close the gap, investing in neighborhood parks at the time. While we received considerable data on infrastructure, we also heard about youth at this time period. So this is a citywide survey, statistically valid. We are actually just closing out another one right now, and we'll look forward to seeing what fresh 2019 data looks like. But you can see at this point, youth sports and programs, police protection, and youth non-sports programs rated very high in terms of importance for Minneapolis residents. Non-statistically valid, but still data from that same time period with very similar questions. This was a survey that we used online and through paper surveys. The difference here is this is, if you want to fill it out, you fill it out. It's not a statistically valid piece. But you can see at that time, even those who were self-selecting into this type of research showed a similar priority for youth sports, police protection, and youth non-sports programs. And with that, I will look to Superintendent Bangor to talk a little bit about how we would be thinking about this gap. So this isn't a simple replace those staff, but actually trying to replace that staffing in a way that meets the current needs of residents and the current needs of youth in particular within the city, and Superintendent Bangor does this best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So one of the things that we're very clear about and the work we've done behind this, there are 6 kind of pillars that we're looking at for recreation. And we spent a lot of time looking at data and understanding really what the youth perspective is and what residents are asking us and what youth are asking us. And so I'll go through this as efficiently as possible. One of the things that we're very proud of is called our ideation spaces. Some people call it technology labs. But we call them ideation spaces because what we're talking about is pursuing active learning through technology. And it really is arts focused with exploration, collaboration, technology, peer-to-peer environment, and community. And there are a group that's sitting back here actually today. We've been doing this at Powderhorn for many years. We've had an incredible lab that's been down and doing wonderful work within the community and focusing on youth and doing everything from audio engineering to documentary work, but really looking at a not passive learning path to leverage technology and art to aid youth and to align them with traditional learning methods. So the idea of this is to make it, to take our youth and to make sure that they're assured learners in other environments, preparing them for future opportunities in technology, knowing that that is really one of the high demand skills that are in our community and in the world, and exposing them to professions that they might not know about. So imagine these ideation spaces throughout our city, in our park and recreation locations, and youth can go there and have a peer-to-peer experience in technology, everything around documentary work, STEAM and STEM, art, music, design graphic work, green screen, 3D printing. It is really, it's not a new concept, but what we're trying to do is we're bringing it to the centers where our youth can walk and be engaged and experience something that is really current. We're really excited about that, and we really want to push that effort for our youth because we heard loud and clear that this is something that's important to them, and it prepares them for the job world. And then we're also looking at youth enrichment through community employment, focused employment. We do a fantastic job, as you know, with lifelong building opportunities through our Teen Works, our Conservation Corps, our urban scholars, our youth design team. It's robust, and what really is incredible about that, it really exposes our youth to new trades, opportunities, and really gives them what they call an apprenticeship. And so it is more than just a job, but it is really job readiness, it's professional development, and it practices skills in leadership, hands-on environmental stewardship, and service learning. And some amazing statistics when I looked at this. We have probably served over 600 youth each year in this youth employment piece. A lot of them are in Code 8 positions where we have them in part-time, but a significant number of them are in environmental or our Teen Works and Urban Scholars piece. We typically have over 1,000 applications every year for jobs. And so if that tells you how important this is and how much, and this is without even really a lot of advertising. So it is something that we do incredibly well, and we give incredible opportunity to our youth through job skills and this employment piece. And I could go on more about this, and the benefits that it gives our kids is really incredible. Another piece that we're really looking at is nature program. And, you know, we know the benefits of nature and what that means for our youth and for our community. So we're going to really increase our nature-based programs foundationally within our recreation centers. We do a wonderful job from bringing our environmental team, and they do 6-week programs, 8-week programs in our centers. And what we want to do is to level that in our recreation centers so that it's not just a 6 to 8 week, but it's year-round. That we're talking about nature-based programs that are connected fundamentally at our recreation centers so that our youth and our community can really have the experience that we want them to have in its benefit and its health and what it means for our youth. And so some of the things that we're looking for in our nature programming goals are increased participation in nature-based programs at NPRB facilities, increase awareness of all natural resources and nature-based recreation opportunities in Minneapolis, promote environment-friendly attitudes and behavior, promote health and well-being in Minneapolis residents through nature. And this is something that is so, I hate to use the word natural for us, because it is what we do. And we have these spaces, 160 parks throughout our system, that we absolutely can connect our kids to in our community to explore and reap the benefits of nature. One of the things that we're very clear about too is imagine creating a park system with all of our rec centers becoming centric in cycling. So everything cycling from bike programs, bike safety camps, bike repair, learn to ride, cycling without age, interpretive nature bike rides, field trips to the Worth Trailhead, teaching kids how to repair bikes, doing everything around cycling that is focused in our centers, and so that you know that our recreation centers are places the community can go to not only how to learn how to ride a bike, but how to connect to nature, how to repair your bike. We want to be able to expand it to cycling without age as an example. There's a chapter in here where we get our seniors or older adults or persons with some disabilities onto a tri-shock type bike and ride them around the city and give the experience of not only cycling but on our pathways, but experiencing really being outside and the sensory experiences you experience with riding. So we are very committed to that, and we really want to push our centers becoming the place of cycling. And then another area is community gardening. We are very focused on looking at our rec centers becoming a place where all gardening happens, where we're growing vegetables, creating places where youth can go to intergeneration with adults, but creating these raised gardens and these raised vegetable gardens in our centers to where youth can dig their hands in the dirt, they can learn about gardening, they can understand what they're putting into their body, and growing vegetables. Some of the things that we're really clear about that they'll also learn is soil testing, soil amendments, proper site selection, soil preparation, tool selection and soil presentation, planting seasons, vegetables and fruits to be grown, choosing seed versus plants. All of those things that we teach our local farmers, that these kids we'll connect them to local farmers, and at the end of it, they'll be giving away tons of pounds of food back to the community, but not only growing the food, but also giving it back to the community and preparing meals. And so we want to center that again in our facilities and be able to bring our youth to that experience, not only with our older adults, but with our youth, so that they can have fresh vegetables in areas we call food deserts. And the last thing is really intergenerational centers of excellence. And what we are very clear about is our seniors or our older adults, the precious jewels that they are and the knowledge that they bring to our youth. And one of the things we're very clear about is that if we can create places, senior centers of excellence, where we look at senior center programs and we focus on the excellence of delivery of senior programs, but the key to that is that we then have intergenerational, where the youth are connected to our seniors, and they can do everything from technology to arts, learning through collaborative activities, and doing music and exercise and riding bikes. So we are very focused on creating these senior centers of excellence, different locations throughout our park system, so we can connect our youth to those experiences, and they can work with our seniors and get the knowledge and the joy of truly building community with our seniors. Those are just some of the areas that we're focused on right now that we've heard loud and clear from the community. I look forward to spending more time and giving more context to these and giving more understanding to what we're trying to accomplish. But we are very focused on really looking at ideation spaces, and youth enrichment is one of our two focuses, but we look forward to having more conversation around this. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Director Julie Weissman, not Jennifer, but Julie Weissman, to share more information.
Thank you, Superintendent. Welcome, Julie.
Good evening, President Wheeler and board members. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of financial slides. This is repetitive of information that was sent to you in July, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I'm going to highlight a couple of the overall changes. So for our 5-year financial outlook for 2020, our current service level is at 5.78%, and that is the amount that the mayor recommended in the mayor's recommended budget. The things that I will highlight here is that property taxes is 75% of the funding for the general fund, so that one funding source. So we're, very heavily dependent on property taxes. Fees, fines, and other revenues is increased for the commons. So the amount that the city will be providing for the operations and maintenance of the Commons Park, that is reflected in that number. And then likewise, the other expenditure amount has been increased by that Commons amount. And then for our tree preservation and forestation levy, for 2020, we have a 3.93% current service level for that fund. Our board met in May for a couple of different budget retreats, and during that time, the board the board considered some priorities and investments that both the departments had submitted and the board had also submitted. And the things that rose to the top are shown here as our priority 2, investing in youth, which includes the ideation spaces, the youth employment, an addition of a full-service school, and an addition of some free after-school programming, and then also a smaller amounts of priority 3 to increase snow removal, mowing, and weed harvesting. We also here are providing our 5-year outlook for our permanent improvement fund. You also received during July our actual capital program, and you will also be receiving it again tonight in your packet. But that's the supportive detail, line by line item, park by park detail of the capital improvement that are planned between 2020 and 2024. So our maximum property tax levy request, our board met on September 4th and passed a resolution for the maximum property tax levy. When you look at taxes, city taxes that are paid fully by City of Minneapolis residents, we are about 7 cents on the dollar when you look at the city, the school board, the county, and other taxing jurisdictions. Again, this is the same slide that Director Intermill provided, and I want to just highlight that our 5.73% property tax levy increase is the combination of our general fund and our tree forestation fund. So the mayor's recommended budget includes the current service level that we are asking for the Park and Recreation Board. So our 5.73% is included in the overall city increase of 6.95%. So our board on September 4th adopted Resolution 2019-312, requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation set a maximum for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board at $71 million, a little over. So that is a higher request than what the mayor recommended. If you're looking at the city overall, the difference between us, our request, and the mayor's request is just over $1.5 million, or approximately 0.44%, so less than 0.5%. So the mayor has vetoed that resolution, and our board on September 18 will revisit our maximum property tax levy request at that time in hope to bring forward a resolution to this body before the September 25th adoption of the maximum levy. And that's it for me.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Weisman. Now we have, do I need to ring it into a public hearing? Thank you. Yes, as mentioned earlier, you'll have 2 minutes to speak at the public hearing, and does somebody want to, do we make a motion? Make a motion to have?
I would move to open the public hearing on the property tax levy. Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Call to order the public hearing. We've got 8 names that are printed here. If there's anybody else who's coming later who wants to speak, you certainly can do that. You're allowed 2 minutes, and they can sign up right over there by the clerk's station. So the first one is Mohammed Ali Hassan. Please state your full name and where you live, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Muhammad Ali Hassan. I'm representing Somali American Peace Council, and Good evening, Mr. Mayor and board member and council members. I'm here to support the money or the request that they're asking the board of the recreation, Park Barry Recreation. So there is a need, and there is a need because I can give you a few points here where if you see there's an increase in our youth, some violence and crimes is taking place, and this can be contributed some gang members that's going place. Unfortunately, these are some kids their parents brought from civil wars to bring them here, and there's some difficulty going through. So whatever help that we can get and money goes through the park, we can work with them, whatever programs that can be done, so we can prevent our kids to go to this violent stuff that they're going through. So we need to really invest in our youth. We need to have some youth outreach programs. For instance, in our organization, Somali American Peace Council, we have a program called Sports for Peace. And this program connects to our youth through sports. And one of the things that we like to do is to strive to involve the Somali youth community to prevent from violence, whether those who would be doing here, there are names like over here, Somali Mafia, and some weird things that you hear. And some kids in the past, they used to go abroad to go through violence as well. So we're also trying to do with this by working with some of the clubs here in sports clubs, up to maybe 300 youth or more. The question would be like, why sports? It's one of the programs that we choose. Sports can be a very powerful tool to promote peace and tolerance and understanding by bringing these people together across boundaries and whatever difficulty they have. Some of these gangs have actually fighting among themselves, so we like to go through working with the board, and we are supporting the Park and Recreation Board to get the funding that they're looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You were just right on the 2-minute mark. I tell you, you were well organized. Thank you for your testimony. They'll be having signs over there, just so you know. And we still have the questions up on the board. We should be having some video. I don't know. They know they're not doing it? Oh, gosh.
Thank you.
You don't want to look at that. Okay. Our second person is Abdirahman Mukhtar, if I'm pronouncing it right. Thank you. It's better handwriting than I have, so welcome. Nice to have you here. Thank you.
Good evening, President Wheeler, Mayor Jacob, President Bona, and Commissioner Abdi, and all the elected officials who are here. My name is Abdirahman Mukhtar. I am a resident of City Riverside neighborhood and a youth advocate. So I'm a father of 4 boys who are elementary, middle school, and high school. For over 19 years, I have done youth work, and I don't know if you know, as a city, 2016, United Way eliminated their funding for all K-6 after-school programs. That really affected the number of quality after-school programs and youth programs in the city of Minneapolis and a lot of other places. Because of that, a lot of times we talk about the achievement gap, we talk about youth violence, but we really don't talk about the lack of quality after-school programs and youth programs in the city. So I'm here to advocate, and I'm here to encourage that we support after-school programs, youth funding, and the park board, the money that they're asking for youth programs, because the park board itself is in a better place where a lot of young people go to these places and recreation centers and park spaces as a youth-friendly space, safe place, but also it's a second home for them. So I'm here to really encourage that you look into this funding, and not only for the sake of the city, but for the sake of the families that really need high-quality programs for their kids and children. The young people that don't have a lot of people that are advocating for them. The young adults who really don't have places that they can call their own space. So I just want to make sure that I came tonight and just remind you that from 2016, the last 3 years, we have less youth programs in the city. We have less after-school programs in the city. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Our third speaker is Sean Ladden. Welcome, Sean.
President Wheeler, estimators. Thanks for having us here. My name's Sean Layden. I'm a resident of Whittier and part of the renter majority in the city. I also work in the Minneapolis Public Schools. Here to speak to ask you to support the requested levy referendum from the Minneapolis Parks. Now, as we have seen in our country, we have a federal government that's going after our young people. And unfortunately, we have a state government that hasn't found its way to get where it needs to be. So I think part of our city values is to wrap our arms around our youth. And a relatively modest increase that has been requested by the Park Board, I would urge you to support. We see in every neighborhood, but particularly in our most disadvantaged neighborhoods, our kids of color, who could benefit from free after-school programming in the Harrison neighborhood, who could benefit from expanding full-service community schools and parks, young people who need work, as we heard testifiers say, 1,000 applications for 600 positions. That tells us something. We've got to listen to our young people. And so I'd urge you, I think the city of Minneapolis as a whole is looking to us to provide leadership to show the way. And when our federal government is so clearly coming after us, and I fear a failure to raise a modest amount of the taxing levy for the parks is going to force unnecessary trade-offs with current programming, because a clear message, I believe, was sent by voters that we've got to do more for kids in our city. So I would urge you to support the Park Board levy referendum, or levy request that they put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ladden. If anybody has come in who wants to speak, if you go over there, you can sign up to speak. We're now going to have, it's Natasha, and I can't, I can't read the last name. Thank you. Sorry. Now that looks like, sort of like my handwriting.
Yes. A tired teacher's handwriting. My name is Natasha Doctor, and I am proud to be a Minneapolis public school teacher in the city that I call home. I teach at Anderson United Community School in the Phillips neighborhood, and I am a condo owner in the East Isles neighborhood. We know the statistics about racial disparities in our city. When I voted in 2017 elections, I voted for a city government that would invest in our young people. The parks are an essential service for our kids, and as educators, we see parks programming as an essential extension of our schools. I am here today as an educator and as a resident to urge you all to support the parks property tax levy and invest in our young people in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And next we have got Greta Callahan.
Thank you. Thank you, President and Board. My name is Greta Callahan. I'm a homeowner in the Armitage neighborhood. I'm a taxpayer, and I am clearly a kindergarten teacher at Bethune Community School, which is a new full-service community school in collaboration with the parks. And of course, all of these things are in Minneapolis. I believe in investing in our youth. It should be at the top of our priority list. We talk a lot about equity for our kids in Minneapolis, and that's why I support this levy request and the park's effort to do this work by hiring young people for summer employment, expanding full-service community schools, and offering free childcare to families in neighborhoods that need it most, like the North Side Harrison neighborhood where I currently teach. Thank you for putting our youth first by supporting this request.
Thank you so much, Ms. Callahan. The next is it Stephen Slater? Stephen. Apologize.
That's okay. It's, I still wait the journalists say it.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Well, this is my first time in front of the board and Mr. Mayor, Mr. President. I'm here in support of Powderhorn Park and the Idea Works Center that we run. We've been there for 10 years, and we teach kids music and video technology. It's a free program from 8 to 20-year-olds. And I'm the president of the JLR Foundation. Again, my name is Stephen Slater. And I'd like for my students to stand up. just want to show you, these are, they're advocating for us, young men and women who've been through our program over the past several years. And like I said, it's a free program, and we're here to support the ideation centers, and we look forward to working with you. Now, thank you very much. I guess I still have more time to say. I want to thank this guy right here, Al Bangor, who helped us start this program back in 2007. We are a 501c3. We, the JLR Foundation is, and we work with colleges, so we have kids teaching kids. The students get a tuition credit to teach kids about music and video technology. We have a full studio, and from workstations to sound room. I also have here Morris Hayes, who I've known for years. He was a keyboard player for Prince, who also helped me start this program. So with that, I want to thank you guys for letting us talk.
Thank you for coming.
Pardon me? Oh yes, I want to real quick. Prince actually gave us his first soundboard from Paisley Park, and some private funding. And he asked me not to tell anyone, but since he moved on to another level, I'm telling everybody. So he can take it up with me like later on. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so very much, Stefan. Thank you. A.K. Hassan.
Thank you, President Wheeler, board members. I'm A.K. Hassan, Vice President of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and I'm here along with my neighbors and residents of City of Minneapolis to urge the tax levy that we requested on behalf of the youth in Minneapolis, as well as the residents that look up to us. Well, I just want to talk one park that impacted me growing up in the City of Minneapolis, Peavy Park, which is on Franklin in Chicago, which if you talk to most of those police officers that serve in that district, which includes Ward 6, which is in Ward 6, is they say this is the hardest crime, you know? And they spend a lot of time, there's always a lot of things that are happening, but luckily, you know, thanks to the board members of the Park and Recreation Board, we invested. Now we have a beautiful park that's serving the kids. That we have a basketball court, we have a soccer field, we have a new playground, but what are they missing is the question. I was just there yesterday, and then they asked me, okay, now we have summer, what about the winter? I didn't answer to give it to, you know, obviously. We have a center that's there, but there's nothing there for them. The only thing that they have is a PlayStation. Well, I hope you guys imagine how that feels. As someone, I grew up in that park. I didn't have any services. There was nothing. But today, I have a new soccer field. I'm happy. A new basketball court. But it's still yet, we didn't get there yet. There's more work that needs to be done. And also, I want to keep I want to leave this on the record from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a statement that she sent me. For more than a generation in Minneapolis, there has been a significant underinvestment in our youth and out-of-school time programs. I applaud the Park Board's Youth Service Levy. It's a bold vision to closing the funding gap and making the youth investments we need now. I'm looking forward to supporting the Park Board and City to find every dollar available for our city's most precious resource, our youth. By Representative Ilhan Omar. I just want to leave that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, A.K. Hassan. Appreciate that. Morris Hayes is the next person on the list, the last name I have.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished members of the council and the mayor. I am Morris Hayes. I'm a former resident of South Minneapolis here. I'm a 20-year keyboard player for Prince, a local hero. And I wanted to speak briefly about the levy regarding the programs for like Idea Works and the Parks program and say how important it is. I'm personally the product of a dream myself, and programs like this certainly help youth to have the ability to do some things instead of finding negative things to get involved with. Programs like this provide a very positive way for that energy to be spent. And I'm very proud of the work that's happened at the Powderhorn location for the last quite a few years, and that Stefan's been working with, and we would love to see that type of work be expanded and continue. It's very important. I travel the world now. I'm a kid from a small town in Arkansas. I came here to live the dream and found it here in Minneapolis. I'd love to see other people be able to do what I've been able to do with my career in life. And I think this program and other programs of this nature provide an outlet for children to be able to have that opportunity. So we would definitely put our support behind anything that's going to further that to be the case. And thank you for your time and consideration regarding this great program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Next person on our list is somebody most of us know pretty well, Mary Merrill. Welcome.
Thank you.
I remember when you were superintendent the first time.
It's been a while, but I also remember that time. Mary Merrill from our neighborhood. Happy to be here, President Wheeler, Mayor Fry, directors and board members, Bourne and Wasami. I came down because I just had to lend my voice to the concern that I've heard in this room this evening, the concern about youth. And I've been around long enough to know that we've been down this path before. And it took the work of mayors like Frazier, South Belton, school board, and park board working together to deal with the issues that were surrounding our youth. Our youth were being threatened, and we needed to come forward as a city and get behind our youth and figure out what we were going to do to make sure that they had the right connections with the right people. And so we created new programming for them. What I learned last year was that at the YCB, the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board, was that there had been a significant disinvestment in youth over the last 20 years. I was shocked. I was afraid. I'm like, and you know, we've got to tell people this is a problem. We're going to be facing other kinds of issues, much more expensive ones down the road if we don't sound the alarm and say we have to, as a city, do something for our youth. And so I would simply say in support of the park board, because this is really not about them to me, it's about our kids, that whatever we can do to make sure that we have appropriate funding. And I know that the challenges, the city's under a lot of challenges. I know that, you know, with homelessness and high rent and all of the violence. I'm frightened for St. Paul and what's been happening over there on the playground. So I just think that we've got to be cognizant of making tiny investments now that are going to continue to pay off later on so that our kids are developing the skills, are having the opportunity to participate in adventuresome and exciting programming, whether they be arts, whether they be survival skills, whether they be job skills. Am I running out of time? Okay, I'm sorry. I just thank you for this opportunity to share that with you. And I know all of you care deeply about our young people, and we have to figure out a way to make sure that they are safe and that they are able to grow in a rich and fulfilling environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. Appreciate it. And looks like the last person on our list is Londell French, who is a Park Board Commissioner. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor. I'm here to talk about, well, first, I'm a proud neighbor in the central neighborhood community, which is my neighborhood. As also, Green Central was the first park I ever worked at when I came to Minneapolis, shortly after I moved up here. And what I learned about our parks is it is definitely the place to find and know everybody. I didn't know a soul up here when I moved up here 20 years ago. I worked in our parks, I worked at our front desk, and I worked doing playground supervision. If you want to get to know a neighborhood, you want to get to know people in the neighborhood, go work in our parks. Go hang out in our parks and go see the kids, go see the teenagers growing up. If you're working in 3 or 4 years, you get to see them kind of grow up a little bit. And what I do remember about working in our parks back then is that there was a violence issue here in Minneapolis right before I moved up here. And our parks had a program called Fat Summer, which our parks stayed open till 11 o'clock at night. It provided a safe place with caring adults to 11 o'clock at night. So if a kid was having an issue at 8:30 at night or 9 o'clock at night when everything else was probably shut down, they could come to our park. So since the recession, we haven't staffed our parks at that level. So we know violence is on the uptick in our city. And I believe our park system is the best way to combat that. The best way to stop a bullet is with a job. Our jobs program, it's heartbreaking to see kids at the end of the spring when they know they didn't get a job this summer. Because they start January, February asking, when are the job applications coming out? When can I sign up for Teen Works? Because it's something very, very, very special to have some money in your pocket when you don't really have no money, to be able to go out and hang out with your friends, maybe a trip to Valley Fair, go swimming, doing something fun. That's what we provide, the parks provide. A couple extra dollars, some training, a place to make mistakes at with caring adults who know them. So we're asking for, I want to say thank you for the recommendation, but we're asking for more. We need more. And I think the kids in our city need more, and I'm asking this board to do more. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Commissioner French. There are no more names on our list. So I would gavel the public hearing to a close. Thank you all for participating. Any directions we have to staff? One of our members had surgery on Monday, and so I told her we'd have a vote whether or not to send her a get well card. She laughed pretty hard at that, but Carol couldn't be here because of some surgery she had, and we wish her a speedy recovery. Any agenda items for our next meeting?
Mr. President, I would only remind the board, as it is already well aware, that the next meeting on September 25 at the same time, 5:05 p.m., would be the anticipated vote by this body then on setting the maximum tax levy for the
Maximum tax levy on the 25th. Do you have something, sir?
No.
No. I need to visit with both of you following our meeting about something that's come up about our staffing situation. Well, I think we can entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for being here. We've got